that over the next couple of days, that is going to bear such incredible fruit for the world, not just for us as members of the Catholic Church, but for everyone who is anticipating this moment that is being watched by thousands of journalists who are then communicating it to millions and billions of Catholics and non-Catholics living right now. The conclave and its history.
Yes.
It's pretty dicey. It's very typical biblical in terms of the murders and the deaths and the influences and political desires that come with it. How would you characterize how it's evolved over time, Matthew?
Well, first, it's useful to remember that it is not divinely constituted. So it is a juridical act. It is an act of an election. Now we trust it and place our hopes, and we can talk more about the Holy Spirit, the role of the Holy Spirit in all of this. But we have seen an evolution of elections, and it is the right of any pope to change the rules if he so chooses. You know, John Paul II built on previous rules that existed. But if we go back to the early church, we know that it is by tradition that Peter chose Linus and other successors then. And then in the early days of the church, the small Christian community would pick their pope. They would elect their pope. There's a famous story, I think in 236, at the election of Pope Fabian, that the Christians in the city couldn't quite decide, and a white dove, his head. And they realized clearly somebody wants him to be picked. So it's a cute story, but in a way, it's always looking for the signs of how we can choose a Holy Father. And then over time, it became more formalized, centering in the clergy of Rome, which is why we continue to do that in a lot of ways with the College of Cardinals. And then in 1059, sort of the creation of what we think of the modern College of Cardinals, that shifted specifically to them. Other changes came in, and then of course came these long delays, partly because of the interference of great powers, emperors and kings, and actually some of the local nobility in Rome, the names that are lost to history in some ways, the Tusculani, the Crescenti, all of them trying to influence the Bishop of Rome for their own devices. And yet through it all, we always have to stress that the popes have been an unbroken line of succession. And while some popes have made terrible mistakes, some of them have been nicknamed the bad popes, all of them have in some way contributed to the life of the church and have never wavered in terms of true teaching. So that's something that's really, in the dark history of papal elections and papal history, that's something we always have to stress.
And hopefully that will be a balm to some people who are nervous or worried about the outcome of this conclave. Well, I know that Alan Holdren, our EWTN news correspondent and former Vatican bureau chief, put together a little history of the conclave for us to learn a little more in detail what we're about to experience.
The word conclave, from the Latin cum clave, which means closed with a key, evokes in our minds images of an orphan church that expectantly awaits the name of who will be the next successor of St. Peter. It makes us think to the cardinal electors gathered behind closed doors in the Sistine Chapel, where Michelangelo's universal judgment reminds us that they will have to give an account to God at the end of their days. But the word conclave also brings